Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your man, DJ Caveman. We back again for another episode of Inside the Mind of, where we sit down with folks and have conversations predominantly revolving around men's health and the importance of that, but on how it plays a role in each and every person we talk to's career. Today on the show, we have a very special guest, man. We go way back into the time machine. I was just thinking today, like my network of people is vast, and I tell people all the time I know some pretty interesting and amazing folks, and so this is an opportunity for me to bring yet another one on. Shit, we go all the way back before high school.
Yep.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So bring it to the stage today, Mr. Leon Correy.
What's good?
On Inside the Mind of. What's going on, sir? How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. I appreciate that intro and considering me a someone who's doing something. So I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Once we get into it, you know what I mean? We always start with, your backstory. So feel free to go ahead and tell the people who you are and what you do. And
all right. My name is Leon Correy. What do I do? So I do a lot of things. First and foremost, I'm a father and a husband. Those are my primary occupation. I am also a sales executive for a software startup in the green technology space. And I am as of April, I am a former chair of the select board for the town of Fairhaven, Massachusetts, which, to at least explain, because until I lived in a town that had one, I had no idea what a select board was. So the select board, people often liken it to like city council, similar but different, whereas the city council is the legislative branch, the select board is the executive branch. So imagine you have we were a board of 5, so imagine you have 5 mayors, and that board establishes all of the legislation, all of the policy for the town, and then we have a town administrator who enacts and does all of the work behind it to to implement the policy and such that we set for the town. And I was the chair of that board, which was an interesting experience, but I was the first person of color ever elected to the select board, and so also the first person of color to be chair of the select board.
Dope. So let's start there as the chairman of the select board, kind of like in a sense like the mayor of mayors. Yeah. That's it seems like a lot of weight on one person. What were some of the responsibilities that you had as the select board chair?
So you establish the budget for the town, and you approve the budget for the town. You set the priorities. So an example is the school department typically is separate. Schools are typically implemented by the state, and a lot of the rules and structure within it are decided by the state. But things we tried to have an override because the town was falling short of where we needed the revenues to be. And so we had put a package together and asked the public to vote on, whether we would basically increase their taxes. Needless to say, they voted against it. But even, having the willingness to do it, we had to come together as a board to make that decision that we would even ask for it. And so it could be stuff as small as I'm trying to have a block party, can you approve it? All the way up to, someone trying to build a new super center in the town. At some point it'll cross the select board's desk, and that was the top authority in the town. So it was an experience. It was sometimes good, sometimes bad. I will say the majority of the time, or the majority of the people within the town were supportive. They were just quietly supportive. And so you had a vocal minority that, because although they were the minority with respect to sentiment, they were the majority. So they were the only noise you were hearing was the negative noise, and the hate speak. But in a town like this where, you know, something I should have picked up on beforehand was, if I'm the first person of color in 2021, I think was when I got elected, then that kind of says something about the town. And
Right.
so I shouldn't have been so naive going in, and I think I should have expected more of what I got.
I was gonna be my next question. Like being in a town like Fairhaven, which is from what I know about it is like a fairly small town.
Mhm.
Um, and so was there like a ton of pushback during the election process? Like, and like how did that kind of play into like whether or not you wanted to do it? Like what made you want to do it other than like the want to be a part of the process?
During the election process, and actually, like when I was campaigning, my campaign was very grassroots, like going door to door. I didn't have a staff. I didn't have all of that. It was me and my family. That was it. My wife and kids would be out putting the yard signs up, and I would be out just knocking on doors. I knocked on 3,000 doors approximately, over the course of a month. I just wore my shoes out. But in being that I wasn't from this town, people didn't know me, and there were fake narratives being put out there. I needed to introduce myself and kind of introduce this degree of transparency into my life so that these people could get to know everything they needed to know in a really short amount of time. And so it worked to a degree. I didn't really run into a lot of stuff during the campaign. There were a couple things, people closing the door, some ignorant questions, stuff like that. But all in all, um, I don't know if people didn't necessarily think I could win or what, but I didn't get much. And it never really got bad until I became the chair. That
Right.
was when kind of everything came out. And I think if I was a different kind of person, I think they thought they were getting someone a little bit more conformed, someone who would just take it versus someone who would call it out and push back. When I started to call it out and push back is when, it got really ugly and really messy, and the media got involved. And it wasn't just, the people you expect, the, hard right, MAGA, so on people, that I was having the issue with. It was people who were calling themselves liberals, who weren't necessarily as liberal, or maybe they forgot that, Black people or people of color are included in the ones that you're supposed to care about. But that's just how it worked out.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's a lot of challenges in that. Um, were you doing like a regular 9 to 5 during that time, or was it just so how was it balancing your duties as the selectman and the select chair, and then your duties at home, and then your duties for your job, like providing for your family, like
Man, so
what was the biggest struggle in that?
it's virtually volunteer. They like to the public likes to throw around that you get this little $400 a month stipend, but that doesn't even pay for like gas, getting around and all the stuff you go to, and of the time commitment. It is a 40-hour a week job. You're responding to all sorts of stuff. Everybody's complaint is important to them, and that was one of the first things that I recognized, or like developed an appreciation for, was, although it may seem small in the grand scheme of things, to that person it was important. So I made it to make myself available. And I had, going in, my plan was to only do it for 2, maybe 3 terms, because I wanted to be able to put so much into it that I knew it wasn't meant to be a lifetime commitment. It wasn't like I was trying to be a career politician. I saw an opportunity for me to help. And I liked the town that I was living in. I was already involved in helping out and stuff in the school, at my kids' school, and stuff like that. And so I felt like, with my academic background and my business background, I could step in town. And so the toughest things to balance is really the work, family, town. And all three of these things on their own are full-time jobs. And you don't want to cheat any of them. So how do you incorporate or balance or manage and let everybody feel important while you're doing all of these things? Because you could easily drop off on any one of them. You could, become a half-ass father, or start, as a sales exec, just fall off there, not deliver the targets you're supposed to. I can assure you, if you start to neglect the town, they will tell you. So that's certainly not an option. And I kind of made it clear, but I also had these conversations with my family going into it so that they were supportive and understood. And so that, I included them in as much as possible. A lot of the events I would go to, if they were family friendly events, I would bring my kids, I would bring the family, so that they got to participate. My son is my youngest, and he's 5 now. And I say a lot. He's gonna miss it the most because he got to hang out with me and go, and people would give him candy and shake his hand and, "Hey, little buddy," and stop in the fire station and anytime he wanted and hang out on the trucks or do whatever. Like, he got a degree of exposure, as a toddler slash preschooler, that most kids don't necessarily get. And so this was normal for him. To be able to get treated like that, to walk into town hall and have an admin in an office basically bring him around, and it was like trick or treating all year round. Anytime he wanted some candy, just go into town hall and walk around, and he was good.
Right. He's like a little kind of a celebrity.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's talk about like how you cope with those stresses. Like, what's in your, like, what mentally, like, did you have to deal with, as far as, like, I always like to use the reference of, like, like, dudes never really cry in public. We always cry in the shower. You know what I'm saying? And what were some of your like what's in your mental health toolbox, as far as, like, how you were able to cope and keep the balance right? How important was, like, your wife in that situation, to kind of help you stay even during the grind while you were, and did you actually, this is a two-part question, I guess. When you became the selectman, were you automatically the chair, or was that like a process of, like, you get elected and then, there's already a chair in that position, and then, talk to me about kind of how that process worked.
Yeah, so the first year I was actually vice chair, and you're voted by the board. So the board nominates and votes within itself who is going to be the chair. So I was voted by the board in my second year, or in my last year, to be the chair. So that's how you just run to be on the select board, and then you decide amongst yourselves. So that was, pretty. They try to keep a rotation, but so that it's not one person. But sometimes you have someone who just fits because everybody has different skill sets, and so it worked out that mine was one that I was good at just keeping everybody involved and being responsive to the public, and also interacting with the public. I was just more comfortable communicating myself, with the people in general, and so it worked out in that sense. With regard to my mental toolkit, I had, as a kid, when I was 13, my mother passed away, and I dealt with a lot of tragedy at an early age, and I think that's helped to build up, that leather exterior, to start to toughen up. But the problem is, as a man, but particularly as a black man, it's never really okay for us to let it out. It's never where nobody cares. First of all,
Right.
we're supposed to just be tough and take it. And then when we do, we're often considered, then we're weak, or we're less of a man, or whatever it is. You either be a man, suck it up, or whatever. But it's just the resilience to take that and just keep it moving. I think some of the things were I have, and I'm lucky enough to have had some, important people in my life as a young age to help me build an important sense of self. where I believe in myself. I understand why I'm there. I understood what I was doing, and I have a confidence in myself that was the foundation for it. The other part is one of the things I would often say within the town or wherever is I've been a black man my whole life, so you're not going to surprise me. You're
Right.
not, racists aren't really creative. So the things they're going to say, you've probably heard before, some variation of. I think the toughest part actually was my wife is Portuguese, and so a lot of the experiences were new to her. And she was one, early on we had a conversation, and she was one of those I don't see color kind of people. And I had to explain to her that's a narrative that you can have because, or you could have because you weren't a person of color. But now that your family is of color, like you have to.
Right.
You have no choice. This is part of it in order to make yourself able to handle it. So there was a lot of communication that went on. But I'll also say I don't know that I necessarily really handled it that great because I didn't really have anywhere to go. I just had to be resilient. Sometimes I would just kind of sit, and I think my alone time, although as a father and an employee and an elected official wasn't often, but like my time in the car, being living near water, would take a ride and just go sit somewhere. Would go and actually sit at the cemetery and talk to my mother.
Right.
Um, those were things that were kind of my way out or my outlet because, as one of the things that I learned was particularly as a person of color who grew up in an inner city environment, um, it's you don't the pool of people who can relate to you gets smaller and smaller as you achieve more and more, or as you do more and more. The pool of people that you grew up with, that you have relationships with, that can relate to you. I mean, how many people do you know who were the first person of color to be an elected official in a town and be able to have a conversation where they can understand what you're going through? Because to a lot of people, my problems sound like first world problems. They're like, well, you got a house and a car and whatever. Like, I would love to have those problems, but it's, my problems hurt me just like your problems hurt you. So I'm still learning. I think that is actually what helped me develop a stronger appreciation for what men deal with, for what Black men in particular deal with, was going through a lot of those experiences all at the same time. The town stuff and work was tough, and and then balancing what my family was going through, just watching it, and then the media stepping in, and then some of the discussions that I had with my family, and all of that together. I will say though, one thing that was somewhat, my brother and I would talk a bit, and I think although I think politically we differ, not from a red and blue standpoint, but I am more outspoken and more willing to call it out, whereas my brother is more the turn the other cheek and like you don't like just dismiss it kind of person. The fact that he was a very public person, played in the NFL, have had all that exposure. He's at least used to having to endure a lot. And so, especially being a corner, being on that island, you deal with failure on every play. So I think some of that was helpful, and just being able to talk to him and kind of get some of it out there.
Right. I was gonna touch on that a little bit, like as an athlete and the brother to a professional athlete. Like you were in a unique situation where you kind of had nobody to be like the big bro in that situation. You know what I mean? Because you're the first guy. You know what I mean? And I'm sure maybe there was a little bit of animosity from the board. Like who's this new guy who's also a black guy who's also not a small black man. Do you feel like there was like an intimidation, like a quiet intimidation that people felt on your end, and because you didn't have anybody to kind of big brother you through it? Do you think your experience would have been different if you were in a more urban city?
Totally. That's not even a question. Then it was so some of the board was embracing, was welcoming, but I would say in general, it was very much a you're supposed to know your place. I was supposed to just be happy to be there. And so when I had the willingness or felt the desire to start calling these things out, and some of the people that I was calling out were people that others looked up to, you know, many years select board members or whatever, or part of kind of that inner circle of political of small town politicians. That certainly started to bother some people. Also, when I started to get, I just noticed within the party people reaching out, getting invited to stuff like that. There were people who you could tell it rubbed them the wrong way because this was something that they really looked forward to. This was a goal or an accomplishment for them. Whereas for me, it was something that I just decided one day I could help and I got involved. It was never on the radar. I didn't follow the path of being on a smaller board and then running for a smaller position and then what have you. In fact, one day, this someone 20 years younger than me called me when I was first running, and he was trying to give me advice to tell me, I needed to step aside for somebody else and maybe run for something smaller to build it up. And it was laughable to me. It was just like the fact that you felt comfortable as a white guy calling somebody 20 years older than you, more educated, more at least formally educated, more accomplished in every way, and yet you are going to tell them that they basically need to wait their turn and step aside. And also, how dare I call these people out for being ignorant? How dare I, bring these things before the public? It was, there were things I heard like, "We voted you in, know you serve us, know your place, and shut your mouth." Or shut your mouth and serve us because that's your job. And there were things like that were said. And one of the most toxic things in the universe is Facebook, small town Facebook forums. If you want to be insulted, read those. I was also, I was kind of hurt in some ways because I thought that, oh, look, Fairhaven is in the South Coast. It's one town over from New Bedford. Like the South Coast of Massachusetts is kind of the forgotten area within the state.
It's Rhode Island, basically.
Yeah, it's basically like another county in Rhode Island. It has more in common and better relationships with Providence than it does Boston. And so I was just left out. I had no support. Besides the media stepping in and writing about it, I didn't have anybody to reach out to, anybody to step in and help when I was really heavily being attacked. There's a newspaper in this town, and there was a meeting where so we had hired a woman of color to also be the town administrator. And there was a person on the board who had really spent the better part of a year and a half just attacking her and putting her down and going behind her and undermining her. And so finally it got to a point where in a meeting I was just like, "You should be ashamed of yourself." And he tried to twist it and make it something else, but he was the way he was treating her versus the way he had treated the people before him. And me calling that out, that was the most under attack I had ever been. There's a little small town newspaper in this town, and the woman who runs it is supposedly super liberal, very supportive of the LGBTQ plus community. And she wrote 4 pages in her newspaper, just absolutely shitting on me. And it's like, first of all, like somehow it's okay to attack a woman of color, like this white man attacking this woman of color, and people were like, "How dare Leon talk to him this way?" It was like, what way? I didn't yell at him. Actually, it was funny. People were saying I was raising my voice, but the only time I did raise my voice was when he was trying to talk over me. And yet I was the one who was wrong. I was the one who was wrong for calling him out. And the only thing I really did wrong was tell a white man that he was bad. And that was, what I got attacked for. And the Standard wrote another article kind of about that, and kind of called out what really happened versus the slanted part. But by then, nobody cared, because the narrative was painted, and I was this big bad man, talking down to my elder white man.
Yeah, that's funny. You raised an interesting point that I kind of want to touch on quickly. Um, Being in a small town, but being so far removed from like the capital city,
Mhm.
um, you know, do you feel like that was a bigger challenge than like the local politics, is not being able to like kind of reach up in a way to like be like, hey, other black guys or black people in general. Like Boston had a black mayor for a while, black police chiefs, those types of things. Um, but being as you're like, the South Coast is kind of like forgotten, or they kind of like they scoot us down. They scoot the South Coast down, like, oh, you guys are mostly like Rhode Island anyway, so
Mhm.
we don't really have to deal with you guys. Unless there's a scandal, you don't really hear about New
Mhm.
Bedford and that area, Dartmouth, except when there's bad shit that happens
Yep.
and Boston has to kind of like take a look at their like. It's kind of like how, as a parallel, like Lansing looks into Detroit like
Yep.
fuck. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's like we got all this shit going on over here. We don't really need to deal with what's happening over here, but now we have to because bad shit's happening. Um, like what was that like maybe the biggest struggle, or was it more like the local politics of your area, or was it not really being able to reach up to someone more senior that you could like use as a mentor to kind of help you through that situation?
Yeah, that part, the no support, the no mentor, the nowhere to lean, nobody to lean on. Um, that was probably the toughest part of it, because you're on this island alone, and it's really lonely there. I had the town, New Bedford next door, which is certainly diverse, but as a non Cape Verdean black man, I was just kind of there. But also the fact that I'm not from New Bedford, I'm not from this area, not from the South Coast, so my network isn't my network of people that I'm close to. They're not here. They're 40 miles away in Providence or in Boston, and so I didn't have those people to lean on, or to provide support, or to provide the advice, or even just like their presence, standing there so that people know that I'm not fighting this by myself. That was the toughest part of it, because you are navigating and you're fighting this fight all by yourself. And I would reach out and occasionally get the anything you need, whatever you need, I got you. But it's like, while I'm going through this, number one, I don't know what I need. I'm learning on the fly, and having had someone who provide the outside perspective, might would have been very helpful. Someone who was not emotionally or physically tied to it, to provide a little bit of guidance, or tell me what, you're doing the right thing, or you need to turn and kind of take a different route. Either of those things would have been amazing. When I did reach out, not much really came back, except for whatever you need, I got you. And it's I'm also not. It's tough to sit there and dodge the bullets and tell someone you need a vest at the same time.
Indeed. Um, so now that you've been in it, and now like what were like the biggest lessons, I guess, that you take into from doing that? And is there anyone that you see coming up through the ranks that you now have an opportunity to like kind of be that big brother for, so that you don't become the only
Yeah.
um, you know, black selectman chair?
So no. So Fairhaven is a 97% white town.
Yikes.
And within that 3%, I believe it's only 1% black. It's the kind of thing where if there is a new black person, when the town was when Massachusetts was dealing with the whole migrant situation, that was kind of what really accelerated things in the town of Fairhaven when we became a town that had to host. People were up in arms, but we were also, as a select board, we were accused of lying about it because people would say, "Well, I've seen," or "My kid goes to school and they've been there for weeks already." And it's like, what do you have to go on? And one of the things that I got yelled at for was when I said, don't assume just because you see a new person of color, they are a migrant or an unsheltered family. And like, how dare you say that? It's like, well, what other grounds do you have to assume that someone is, other than the fact that they are a brown face that you've never seen before? And I was that brown face, only a few years ago. So all of that is to say, no, there is nobody I see coming behind me. Nobody at all. I think my experience probably made some people take a couple steps back in any aspirations to do so. But at the same time, it's also, within the South Coast, it's made me at least someone who is politically relevant. When the state rep recently decided that he wasn't going to run for reelection and he was going to retire, my phone rang like crazy. People were like, "Hey, are you going to run? Like, you should run. I would support you." Blah blah blah. I was like, "No." Like, I just stepped down from one. Like, I would need some time to kind of process it. I wouldn't jump in. I wouldn't do that to my family. But also, like, being a career politician wasn't on the radar. It wasn't something that I had ever wanted to do at any point in my, like, literally at any point in my life, until I just decided to do it one day. And so whether I do something else, it certainly won't be on the town level. There have been some calls to do some things, and so who knows in the future. But right now the focus is just me and my family. I am still calling out injustice as I see it. Still, watching, making my observations, trying to do stuff, and still trying to implement change. And the reality is, I just want people to be treated correctly, like fair treatment. That's it. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. And as a town, the fact that people won't even acknowledge that racism exists, like, that has literally been the biggest part of the fight, is convincing people that racism exists. Everything gets dismissed as like kids being kids, or like somebody spray painted nigger on a wall and they're like, "Oh, it's some silly kids." It's like, no, it could be a grown man, or somebody spray painted my signs black. I forget about that. When I was running, and it was like, "Oh, it must be some kids." 'Cause, yeah, kids happen to walk around with cans of spray paint in the suburbs, just chilling. But so again, no, there isn't anybody behind me. I learned, first of all, my first takeaway is that my family, my kids have this experience. And so, later in life, they'll be able to look back on this, and anything that anybody of color ever does in this town will forever be tied back to me because I was the first, which is kind of a cool thing. I am in the town's history book as the first person of color to accomplish this goal. And, it's, although that's not what I got into it for. But I also realized, I learned that I can handle myself. I'm tougher than I realized. You don't necessarily know how much you can handle until you have to.
Right.
I can handle a relatively full plate, and I can, keep on doing the things that I need to do. I've always appreciated my family, so that I can't say this gave me a better appreciation for my family, because I already had that. I think it just made me. It helped me focus. It helped me focus on me. It helped me realize and appreciate the need for. It helped me focus and appreciate the need for some sort of commitment or some sort of awareness around men's mental health, because the biggest part is, the men who get the attention are the ones who are shitty dads or deadbeats or whatever. Those are the ones that everybody wants to talk about or wants to compare it to. Whereas on the other side, nobody, women don't face that challenge. It's the ones who are women are the good ones are elevated. The great moms, the ones who have had to endure, and the ones who have had to accomplish and conquer all these hurdles. They're the ones who are put in the front and everybody appreciates and they're glorified, and that's great. They should be. But men are taught, and it's basically beaten into us that that's just doing the job. Like, you're not supposed to be praised for doing your job, for doing what you're supposed to.
Right.
So, so instead, you put all the attention on the ones who aren't there, forgetting that there are a lot of us who tuck in our kids every night. My son can say every night of his life, except for when I had to travel for work, I have put him to bed. That has been our routine. And, because I want him to have that sense of male affection, that, that ability to look at his father and be able to feel comfortable crying to his father, hugging his father, hearing me tell him I love him, expressing that emotion and building that emotional bond, because we didn't have that. We are part of the "you're supposed to be tough, rub some dirt on it" era. And we feel all of these things. We face all of these things. We have nowhere to go. We can't even go to each other because half the times we'll call somebody will call like, "Man, stop bitching."
Yeah. Like, and you touched on your son, and I was going to be, you kind of like you led the conversation, and you kind of answered the question I was going to ask about, like, your experiences, and realizing, becoming a little bit more self-aware. Like, are you using that to like help normalize like the fact that you have a young, black son coming up, and having him be normal, having those conversations, and be okay with expressing the feelings, and it's okay to be like, "I love you, Dad," and actually not awkward.
Yeah, you want him to be. I want my son to be strong because he is a young man of color who is going to have to face challenges. That's just the reality of it. So he's going to have to be strong enough to take it, but he doesn't have to be by himself. I want him to have a place to go or feel like he can go somewhere and feel comfortable doing it. We don't even feel, you sit there and share to somebody, you express yourself to somebody, you feel dirty doing it. Like, you're waiting for them to judge you. You're waiting for them to laugh at you or comment or whatever. It doesn't even feel right coming out. And that, particularly as men of color, like, wait, man, they have the challenges, but it's like they don't have that, that sense of not being able to go anywhere. Because they weren't necessarily, it's not as much a focus on, you're a black man, you're by yourself in this world, and so you just have to take it all. You have to take it all on. My son is going to have that appreciation for his emotions, for his feelings, to be able to manage them and deal with them and put them out there, express them, whatever, instead of letting them just fester inside of them, become toxic energy, and then who knows what becomes of them.
Right. So this is where we change directions, and we get to the fun part of the situation. The challenges. I'm glad that you were able to have the impact that you're able to have. If you have advice for the young up and coming, black politician, male politician, what would be that advice that you would give somebody like, even me, even myself, if I come to you and I'm like, "Hey, Leon, I'm thinking about running for, I don't know, school committee," and what would be, some advice that you would give to somebody who's like new to the political game?
You have to live it. It is like, the two things, you have to be you and you have to live it. It's easy to do the job and be the person when it's you. When you are a certain way and you just maintain it, versus people who, one person for like let's say it's a 4-year term. You're one person for 3 years, and then in the last year, because you're up for re-election, all of a sudden you switch and become something different. We don't have that option, because we aren't the same. So it's also easier to just, if you stay the same person all the time, because people will refer back and remember, like, "Oh, when people were like, oh, well, he just contributed now because he's running for re-elect or he's running for election. It's like, no, 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 no. Wait a minute. Check the references. I gave to my daughter's school when she was, I paid for them to have their Thanksgiving celebration. I bought the kids. I brought a Pelagi truck up here for the 5th grade celebration. I gave basically my contribution virtually paid for the classical football championship rings. And so, being this person, you be that person all the time, and it makes it easy. The other part, though, is if you are an outsider, no matter who you are, no matter what you look like, no matter what your color or gender, if you are an outsider, there are people who live this. Them running, them being part of the political infrastructure is their life, and it is their social circle. And it is something that really matters to them. And so understand that there is a conversation, or there are a lot of conversations that you are not necessarily part of because you are that outsider. So you are by yourself. When you do start to kind of take on the bullets and the rocks are thrown at you, like, you're taking them by yourself because you're not part of that circle. So they're not going to support you. They're not going to help you. So you try to build the relationships with those people, but understand that, you still are by yourself. And so you need to be prepared to take these things on instead of expecting help or support or whatever from the people who sit beside you and make the decisions together.
Word. What would be your book recommendation if you could recommend one book for folks to read? It doesn't have to be necessarily like politically driven, just like a book that you read that like helps you deal with like the mental stresses of life.
So I have a couple, actually. For a young person of color, I had my daughter read, was it Black Brother, Black Brother? And it's about two brothers who are both Black, who one is really light and one is really dark. And so it's kind of the challenges, like one of them is light enough where you kind of can pass for white and the other one not so much. And it deals with some of the challenges that they face despite being together and what have you. And it was a really good read. Not only did I enjoy reading it, but my daughter enjoyed reading it. I shared it with her. So that would be one. And then, if you are into kind of, from a TV standpoint, I personally liked, so I was a Game of Thrones follower, but I got into it late, but I read the books after.
Right.
Those certainly made it a lot better. There's also, what's the name of the book by, oh man, I can't. I wish I could think of it, but there was one that I read, and I cannot think of it. But when it comes to me, I'll have to shoot you a message. I'm actually trying to get it quickly while I'm talking to you, because it was that good, but I don't got it. Sorry. But when it comes to me, I'll certainly share it with you. Because it was a book about just the struggles of a Black man, kind of what his life went through and his challenges and what have you. And he talks on TV, and I can't think of his name. It's literally escaping me right now, so it's gonna piss me off.
When it comes to you, let us know, man. We'll definitely post that up. As a Game of Thrones fan, are you watching House of Dragon, and are you House Green or House Black?
Oh, I'm House Black all day. There's no question. I don't understand how. I mean, certainly, I hope you're not House Green, because then I have to get off your podcast. But I don't even understand how anybody could sit there and be House Green. Like, House Green is like fuckboy house.
Yeah.
So Kristen Cole.
Yeah, they're on the bullshit over there.
Yeah,
over there for sure.
Oh, Between the World and Me, Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Oh, yes.
It's a dope book. It is a great.
Listen to an interview with him on Higher Learning with Van Lathan. Shout out to Van
Yeah,
Lathan.
I listen to that podcast, and sometimes I'm like, like I subscribe and then I unsubscribe and then I resubscribe. Like with that one,
It could be different sometimes, but I think overall, I think they do a good job. And Rachel Lindsay's on my hit list.
okay.
But what's your favorite quote?
Actually, I'll use one that my grandfather always said to me, which was, "Do it all." When people would say, like, "Do you want to do this or do you want to do that?" Or like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And he would stop and be like, "He wants to do it all." And I didn't develop an appreciation for that until I got older. But it's like, why do you have to choose? You can, you have one opportunity, one life to really push, and there's no reason, there's nothing that stops you except for you. And so you have an opportunity. There's no reason you can't do it all. It might not happen immediately. For some, it takes longer than others, but everybody can get there at some point. And I'm certainly not there yet, but I'm working on it.
Word, I like that. Do it all, huh? And last but not least is the most important question of the podcast. Strawberry Pop-Tarts or brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts?
Strawberry.
Word.
The brown sugar cinnamon, they're too sweet. Too sweet for me. Strawberry, you can eat them hot or cold, and they're still delicious. The brown sugar cinnamon, cold, they are.
Yeah. My sentiments exactly. It's not the worst Pop-Tart, but it's not.
No, it's not the worst. But it's just like there are others. If I don't have a toaster, there are a lot that come before. I'm also more of a fruit flavor guy. That's kind of my go-to with anything. Candy, juice, whatever. You give me like some fruity gummy candy, and I'm there all day long. That's just that's me. I love it. So yeah.
Word. I think strawberry is in the lead right now by 1, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Leon, man, I appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us, man, talking about what you do and how, and sharing your story with us today. I think it, like I said every week, like it's important for us to have these conversations and, get a different outlook from, and like everybody sees the world through a different lens. So being able to have these conversations, from your lens today is super beneficial, hopefully, to the folks that are listening and watching and that will watch. So I appreciate you coming on today. If there's any way you want to, anything you want to promote shamelessly, let the people know how they can get in touch with you if they're interested in.
First of all, thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it. Proud of everything you're doing. Happy for you. I love to see people I grew up with win. And it's kind of an despite what everybody says about, folks from Rhode Island or folks from Providence, I'd love to see people that I grew up with win. I want everybody around me, everybody I know to win. I love to see it, first of all. Secondly, I think the most important thing to just, if I can teach, if I can pass anything on to young men and women of color in particular, is believe in yourself and love yourself. Like, you are the person who has to fight for you, and you are the person who has to believe in yourself. And someone who's really close to me, and once she was talking to my wife, and she said, people used to really would ask me, how do you tolerate him so much? People would be like, oh, he's so arrogant, he's so conceited, and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, one day she just looked and realized, it was like, no, he's not. He just believes in himself. It was like, it's not about you. It's not about us. It's not about anybody else. It's not him thinking he's better than you. He just believes in himself. And that is how I see it. I believe in me. If I am, if it comes down to me choosing between me doing something I know I can do well and anybody else doing it, I am going to invest in myself doing it. I'm going to believe that I'm going to do that thing better than anybody else. But I'm only going to, if I'm not good at it, then I'm just not going to do it. Like, that's when I ask somebody, but I will believe and I will trust myself. to be able to, to do it, get it done, and to get to whatever goal or whatever mountain I have to climb. I believe in myself. So that is something that I want everybody to take away. It's also something that I, try to pass on to my younger brother. For anybody, I've referred to him as younger brother a couple times. Will Blackman, for anybody who doesn't know, was my younger brother. Super Bowl champ, former Giant, Packer, Redskin, and Jaguar. And then the other thing is I am Leon Co the third, LeonCothethird, all spelled out on pretty much all of your socials. Instagram, Leon Correy on Facebook, although Facebook tends to be, I'm not, as casual, but if we know each other, feel free. But Instagram, Twitter, or X, or whatever it's called now.
Right.
I also have a more political Instagram, which is Leon. Just look up Leon Correy the third, and it'll come up, or Leon Forfeit, even, I think is actually what it is now. And look it up, and hopefully someday you'll see me, posting. I always say, well, my kids, they're gonna do amazing things, and they're gonna be my greatest accomplishment to the world, or my greatest contribution to the world. Someday, I hope to do something great, but I think they will be my greatest thing, and I take parenting very seriously.
That's what's up, Leon. Man, I appreciate you for coming on, man. We'll have to chop it up and get together soon, guys. That's been another episode of Inside the Mind of. This week on the show, we are inside the mind of Leon Correy. Make sure you follow us on all the socials, man. Hit that like and subscribe on the YouTube channel and the Twitch as well. And we'll check y'all on the next episode. Thank y'all for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.